Have you ever faced a situation so desperate that it felt like all hope was lost? A moment where you're just crying out, wondering where God is in the middle of your pain. There's a powerful story in the Bible that speaks directly to this feeling. A story about a prophet, a grieving mother, and a miracle that defied death itself. Let's dive into the incredible account of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath. Imagine this. A severe famine is ravaging the land. The sky is like brass. Not a drop of rain has fallen, and people are starving. In the midst of this crisis, God tells the prophet Elijah to go to a town called Zarephath. There, he says, a widow will provide for him. Now, think about that. God sends his prophet to a widow for help during a famine. Logically, it makes no sense. Widows were among the most vulnerable people in society. How could she possibly help him when she likely had nothing herself? But Elijah, being a man of extraordinary faith, obeys. He travels to Zarephath, and just as God said, he finds a widow gathering sticks at the city gate. He asks her for a drink of water, and as she goes to get it, he calls out again, asking for a piece of bread. This is where the sheer desperation of the situation becomes crystal clear. Her response is heart-wrenching. She tells him she has nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. She was gathering sticks to make one final meal for herself and her son, and then they were going to lie down and wait for death. Can you feel the weight of that moment? The finality, the hopelessness. This wasn't just about being hungry. It was about staring death in the face. But Elijah, filled with a divine confidence, gives her a command that must have sounded insane. He tells her not to be afraid. He instructs her to go home and make a small loaf of bread for him first, and then make something for herself and her son. He then delivers a promise from God. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. This is a pivotal moment of faith. The widow has a choice. She can cling to the little she has, the logical thing to do, or she can trust the word of this stranger, this prophet of God. She chooses faith. In an incredible act of obedience and trust, she does exactly as Elijah asked, and the miracle unfolds. Every day, she goes to the jar, and there's flour. She goes to the jug, and there's oil. God's provision was constant, a daily reminder of his faithfulness in the midst of scarcity. This first miracle wasn't just about food. It was about God showing up in a desperate situation, proving that faith, even when it seems illogical, opens the door to his provision. Their life settles into this miraculous new normal, a small household sustained by divine intervention. But then, tragedy strikes. The widow's son, her only child, the very person she was trying to keep alive, becomes ill. His sickness grows worse and worse until, finally, he stops breathing. The joy of the miraculous provision is shattered by the devastation of loss. The widow's grief is raw and palpable. She turns to Elijah, her words filled with anguish and confusion. "What do you have against me, man of God?" she cries. "Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" Her pain is so deep that she's looking for someone to blame. From her perspective, things were fine, albeit difficult, before Elijah arrived. Now, the one person she loves most in the world has been taken from her. It's a deeply human reaction. To question, to lash out, to wonder if God's presence has brought more pain than comfort. Her grief highlights the immense emotional stakes of this story. This isn't just a theological event. It's a mother mourning her child. Elijah's response is one of profound compassion and immediate action. He doesn't argue or try to theologize her pain. He simply says, "Give me your son." He takes the boy from her arms, carries him up to the room where he was staying, and lays him on his own bed. Here, alone with God, we see the heart of the prophet. He cries out to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with, by causing her son to die?" Elijah's prayer isn't timid or polite. It's a bold, honest plea. He is wrestling with God, questioning why this suffering would be allowed to happen to a woman who had shown such incredible faith. Then, Elijah does something extraordinary. He stretches himself out on the boy's body 3 times. This physical act is symbolic of a complete identification with the boy's death and a desperate plea for life to be transferred back into him. With each time, he cries out, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." This wasn't just a prayer. It was a desperate, intense, and faith-filled intercession. Elijah wasn't relying on his own power. He was demonstrating a complete and total dependence on God, the only one with authority over life and death. His prayer was a powerful channel, accessing divine intervention in a way that was unprecedented. and the Lord heard Elijah's cry. The Bible tells us the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. This moment is monumental. It's the very first account of a resurrection in the entire Bible. It's a powerful showcase of God's sovereignty. Death does not have the final say. Sickness does not have the final say. God's power is greater. This miracle wasn't just for the boy or the widow. It was a sign for all of humanity, a foreshadowing of the even greater resurrection miracles to come in the New Testament. Elijah picks up the living boy, carries him back downstairs, and presents him to his mother. He says simply, "Look, your son is alive." Imagine the shock, the joy, the overwhelming relief that must have washed over this mother. The son she was mourning, the focus of her deepest grief, is alive and well in her arms. Her response marks the climax of the story. She looks at Elijah and says, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." Her faith journey is complete. She first trusted him for provision, but now she has witnessed the ultimate power of God through him. She doesn't just believe he's a prophet, she knows it with every fibre of her being. The miracle served as undeniable proof of God's presence and power, transforming her perspective entirely. It affirmed Elijah's role, and more importantly, it affirmed the truth and power of the God he served. So what does this ancient story mean for us today? It's a profound testament to the power of prayer. Elijah's life exemplifies the transformative impact of sincere, earnest prayer. He didn't just say a few words. He cried out, he wrestled, he poured out his heart to God. His intense prayer reflected his deep dependence on God, and it resulted in a miraculous outcome. It teaches us that continuous prayer fosters a strong, intimate relationship with God, where we can be honest about our pain and bold in our requests. The story also teaches us about the importance of faith and obedience, especially during adversity. The widow's initial act of making bread for Elijah, an act that defied all human logic, was the gateway to her miracle. Her faith, even when faced with fear and desperation, led to a transformative change in her life. It reminds us that miracles often follow acts of faith and trust. When we step out in obedience to what God asks of us, even when it's scary, we position ourselves to see his miraculous provision. And finally, this narrative powerfully illustrates God's compassion. Elijah's compassion for the widow's grief mirrored God's own heart. God is not a distant deity, indifferent to our suffering. He sees our pain, he hears our cries, and he is a God of restoration. The revival of the widow's son is a beautiful picture of God's willingness to step into our darkest moments and bring life, hope, and restoration. He is a God who has authority over death itself and who offers hope in the most hopeless of situations. This story of Elijah and the widow is more than just a historical account. It's an invitation for us. An invitation to trust God when circumstances seem impossible. An invitation to be bold and earnest in our prayers. And an invitation to believe in a God of miracles, whose compassion is endless and whose power can bring life out of death. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the powerful truths of the Bible. We'll see you in the next video, and God bless.